my best, even though I'm so stressed out. Everything just feels like a test that I fail, so depressed when I can't seem to get out. But something deep inside won't let me quit. I swear that I'm inspired by all this shit. Tell me that I can and I won't, that's what guides me the most. Your lies, I'll do what I want.
On the afternoon of October 4th, 2007, a woman walking her dog through Lackey's Bush on the south end of Barrie, Ontario, which is a wooded park area with trails, she stumbled upon what looked like a human bone off the side of the path. And like a good crime junkie, she called the police to search the area. Initially, upon seeing the bone, they thought it was likely going to turn out to be a leg bone of a deer, but nearby they also found a skull, which was clearly human. So the bones were shipped off to forensics, and dental records confirmed they were that of a missing 33-year-old woman named Alexandra Flanagan. Alexandra, whom most people just called Alex, was born on November 17, 1973, to her parents Wendy and Glenn. She also had two sisters, Michelle and Noelle. She grew up in Barrie, Ontario, and from the day she was born, she was an absolute spitfire. She packed more personality into her small 5'1", 100-pound frame than all of the Spice Girls put together. A head of ginger hair and a smile as wide as you can imagine, her mom Wendy said of her that she was like a cat with 9 lives. She got hit by a car twice, once on her bike and another time clipped by a truck going by. Both times she was fine, and the day after her parents moved to Mississauga, she showed up on their doorstep to surprise them, having hitchhiked there, giving her mom a migraine and some major anxiety. Alex was fearless and confident and full of boundless energy and life. She was extremely outgoing and would befriend anyone. 20 empty seats on a bus, and she would sit right next to you and entertain you, make you feel like you had known her forever. But as we'll see, this fearless, outgoing personality also led her to be a little too trusting of people at times. As an adult, she worked as a hairdresser and was a customer favorite due to her chatty, bubbly personality. She also had more friends than you can count, so her phone was constantly abuzz with notifications. She was also a cat mom with 2 cats named Oliver and Mystic, which I love because I also happen to have a cat named Oliver. She loved her cats and, like most of us cat lovers, spoiled and doted on them. On the night of Sunday, July 8, 2007, after an evening with some friends, Alex was walked through Sunnydale Park with her friend Scott Davidson, and they parted ways at the edge of the park, and Alex waved to him and headed the couple of blocks to her place. The following weekend, the Flanagan family was celebrating the christening of Alex's new nephew. But while sitting in the church waiting for her to show up, Wendy became concerned that she wasn't answering her phone and that she hadn't heard from her, which was odd because she kept in touch very regularly. When Wendy learned that Alex hadn't been to work in the last few days, her and Michelle marched over to her apartment to see what was up. From outside the apartment, they could hear the cats meowing and crying. So they managed to get a police officer to come and open the door for them on a wellness check. Once inside, they saw that the cats had no water and no food, and Wendy knew Alex would never leave her cat babies like that. There was also spoiled food left in the sink and a bad smell from the food in the cat's overfilled litter box. So they knew something bad had happened and that she hadn't been there for at least a few days. Police did issue a missing persons report, but with adults, you are allowed to go missing of your own accord, and I don't think the police took her free-spirited nature as a missing persons profile. She was, after all, a free spirit. Maybe she took off to start a new life or something, but the family knew better and took to Facebook to try and locate her. 3 months of sleepless nights ensued for the family, until her skull and one leg bone was found in Lackey's bush. With someone as outgoing with as many friends and connections as Alex, tracking down a suspect wasn't going to be an easy task. But after pulling Alex's cell phone records, they did notice that she had received 7 text messages from a 25-year-old man named Andrew Keene. All of the texts were unanswered until about 10 p.m. One of them was answered, "Hi, Sexy Lexi," and asked her if she wanted to hook up while his wife was away. Now, a couple of things to mention here. Number one, Alex was a lesbian, so she wouldn't have been interested in Andrew sexually, but they were friends. I've had friends that were gay, and when you are friends with them, you sometimes get a little bit flirty because it's safe. So I've had male friends that will say things like, "Hey, gorgeous," or "Tell me my boobs are looking great," or something like that. It's different when it's a gay friend because it's not creepy fun, it's just like flirty fun. And I think that Alex was probably just used to that from guys because Andrew was aware that she was gay and also married. And because she is so fearless and trusting, she wouldn't have thought anything of it. At least that's my take on it. So she did finally answer his text, and we know later that she did go to his place. Almost certainly not to hook up, but maybe just to say hi. Andrew says later that she was looking for ecstasy, but who knows? I know what it's like to have someone insinuate that your loved one was more into drugs than they really were, so I'm not going to go with that answer. But what we also learn later is that Andrew liked the wild side a little bit. There was a report of a sex worker who testified later that she had called Andrew's phone on the evening of July 8th, and she worked under the name Ultimate She-Male, which is spelled she/male. Now, she didn't testify for the jury, but that was the report from her, and Andrew had been known to patron sex workers, so, he's a little bit of a creep. But I don't think Alex knew that about him, and the text messages are not fully detailed, so we don't really know the exact conversation or the tone of it. So because of this, they do hone in on Andrew. And he was cooperative when first interviewed at first, saying that he'd never saw her that weekend at all. It was just those text messages. He says, "I swear on the life of my unborn child I had nothing to do with it." But the police didn't really buy that, and they got a search warrant to search his place in Innisfail, not Alberta, the one in Ontario. The only things that they found were a couple of knives and a hockey bag with just a trace amount of blood on the inside lining that was a match to Alex, but not enough to make an arrest. But they have their eyes set on Andrew for sure. Unfortunately, although they could have arrested him, they weren't confident that they could convict him with such small evidence against him. In February of 2008, more parts of Alex's body were found near Johnson's Beach, just outside of the city's core on the shores of Kempenfelt Bay. Her torso was still missing. But all they could do was keep surveillance on Keene and hope that he screwed up. And for almost 4 years, and as far as Alex's family was concerned, her case had gone cold. But what the family didn't know was that Mr. Big was about to make his appearance. Why they waited 4 years, I'm not quite sure, likely due to money and funding issues, but also Mr. Big's stings take a lot of preparation, research, and intricate planning because they can be very dangerous and they need the work to be pulled off seamlessly. So Toronto Constable Scott Aikman, who I guess I can name because it was in the Toronto Star, went undercover as a DVD bootlegger. He befriended Keene by staging an accident out front of his apartment by loosening the lug nuts on his tire and asking him for help by offering him a beer. And voila, a bromance begins. And he pulled him in with the offer of making money under the table. He also introduced him to his boss, Mr. Big, played by Hamilton detective Paul Statz. For a whole year, Scott partied it up with Andrew. According to Scott, one time Keene did get a little suspicious when he said no to smoking pot and says, "So I had a couple of puffs. It was for my own safety." I kind of like that guy. Scott Aikman was honored for his undercover work in this case, so I think he did good. One night in 2011, Scott and Andrew attended a hockey game together, and while they were walking through the parking lot towards the car, a non undercover officer from Barrie, who was in on this ruse, approached Keene and told him, "I know that you killed Alexandra." Scott, of course, feigned surprise, and once they got back to Keene's apartment, Andrew asked him if this was going to get him reported to the boss because being under suspicion for murder probably isn't good for the DVD bootlegging business. Scott told him that he knew he had done it because he had judges and cops on the payroll, and in his words, tentacles everywhere, and that it could make him a liability to their organization. So Scott took Andrew to see Paul, and Paul told him that they could make his problem go away by getting a guy that was already serving life in prison to take the rap for it. But they needed all of the details and they needed her torso so that they could get rid of that for him. So it was only a matter of time before the police got enough evidence against him. So he started by saying, "If you can make this go away, I will give you my life." To which Paul responds, "Yeah, you got a monkey on your back." And Andrew told him, "It's not a monkey, it's an elephant." And he started to tell the story. Now, I don't have access to the transcripts of the audio tapes that were played in court, but the Beyond the Rainbow podcast did a reenactment of them. Basically, he does the patented OJ if I did it thing and laid it all out, even drawing them a map and directing them to Alex's torso, which he hid right across the street from the police station near Rose Street on Highway 400 and Bayfield Street. Ballsy, I will give him that. And it was only blocks from his apartment, which was also on Rose Street. He never says why he killed Alex, but he did go into graphic fashion, says that he strangled her with what he thought was a t-shirt while he was on top of her, burned her clothes and cut her up in his bathtub, putting the pieces in his hockey bag and cleaning up with dish soap and bleach, which is why forensic analyst Dave Sibley, who sprayed the apartment with luminol, hadn't come up with anything. Then he took a city bus around the city, dumping the parts hither and yon like a lunatic. So Andrew Keene was arrested and charged with second-degree murder and indignity to a human body. At the trial, which didn't start until June of 2015, 8 years after her murder, which means 8 years of freedom and going on with his stupid little life for Andrew. But Keene's lawyer, Mitch Eason, suggested that he didn't intentionally kill Alex, and therefore he's not guilty of murder, only manslaughter. He also said that Andrew had drunk an entire Texas Mickey that night, so he was not in his right mind, and even suggested that Andrew was a victim of extortion and only confessed because he was worried about being told he was a liability to a crime boss. Interesting that he knew where her torso was, though. In the end, he was convicted on both counts and sentenced to life with eligibility for parole after 17 years. Wendy, Alex's mom, said, "We're very happy. It couldn't have gone much better. It hasn't hit home. I guess it'll take a few days for us to really sink in for all of us. I'm sure Alex is up there somewhere. She's smiling down today and she's very happy." He's going to be eligible for parole in 2028 and is serving his sentence in Kingston. So he, of course, appealed, and in October 2020, an Ontario Court of Appeal panel denied his request to have his conviction of murder and performing indignity to human remains overturned and to have his sentence reduced to 12 years eligibility for parole. The board stated in their decision that the evidence in relation to the dismemberment of Miss Flanagan's body and the disposal of her remains about Barrie, coupled with the victim impact statements from her family, parents, sisters, and aunt, speak to the horrific nature of the appellate's crimes. The recommendation of 9 jurors that the appellate be subject to a 25-year period of parole ineligibility reflects their assessment of the brutal and shocking nature of the appellate's actions. Wendy says it will never be over, and she's going to fight every single one of Keene's attempts to get out of prison, saying he is not remorseful and just wants out of prison. There is a plaque with Alexandra Flanagan's name on a tree in the Arborton in Barrie's Sunnydale Park in her memory.